The State Department says the mission in Afghanistan is complete. The focus now shifting to diplomacy. But for the hundreds of American citizens and thousands of Afghan allies still trying to get out of the country, the war isn't over.
People are dying right now, and many more will die because they can't get out of there. They're trapped.
President Biden touted the U.S. evacuation effort as the largest of its kind. While that may be true, thousands who should have gotten out were turned away. Representative McCaul worked for days to evacuate 250 Christian orphans in an Afghan girls' choir.
They had visas. They had a private plane waiting for them. The Taliban actually let them through. And then our own United States government turned them away after sitting there for a day, back to the Taliban.
Joel Richardson with Global Catalytic Ministries says their rescue efforts faced what felt like deliberate interference each step of the way from the State Department.
Even to the point where Albania had cleared a plane of refugees and they were in the air, and the State Department refused to let them land. They actually had to turn around and go back. So what you're hearing in the news in terms of this great evacuation versus what we were seeing on the ground, it was night and day.
The bureaucratic holdups and other roadblocks caused by official evacuation channels forced lawmakers like McCaul to take matters into their own hands.
Almost running like a parallel government operation to go in and save lives because our own government was not doing an adequate job.
Private operations also bypassing the U.S. government. One of the most successful, known as the Commercial Task Force, was made up of thousands of volunteers. It originally formed to rescue a small group of children. It eventually evacuated more than 5,000 Afghans.
We really tried to target the people that we thought were the highest risk, for anything that, by the Taliban's declaration would be considered a target.
Another well-known operation, Pineapple Express, involved current and former U.S. special operators, aid workers, and intelligence officers. So far, they've brought more than 1,000 people to safety, and their effort is ongoing. Team members saying measures are in place to continue facilitating evacuations. Global Catalytic Ministries will also continue their rescue efforts.
We're essentially establishing an underground railroad. It's a matter of finding a network of safe locations, getting them places where they can sort of lay low in the interim. Little by little, we've run over 50 operations so far.
While much of the ministry's effort is focused on helping people escape, Richardson says about 30% of the Christians in their underground church network actually want to stay.
In fact, we have some of our leaders that were out of the country when the Taliban takeover took place, and they actually have gone back into the country because they're so zealous to see the church continue to expand, to see disciples made.
Now, McCaul says that he plans to hold the administration accountable, and his committee is going to be holding oversight hearings to get to the bottom of this. Pat?
Caitlin, I am simply overwhelmed with grief at the fact that we would surrender what amounts to thousands of people who had worked with us, and also leaving behind a number of Americans who may become hostages. But the fact that a plane load of people who had been cleared were actually turned back by our State Department, by Blinken and his crowd, I can't understand it. Do you have any concept of why it happened?
Pat, that's the question that everybody wants to know, and it doesn't make any sense. These groups that I spoke with, not a single one felt like the U.S. government was supporting them, and many of those people were lawmakers. So they've got, Representative McCaul says he has top connections at the Pentagon, top connections in the State Department, and he was running into those same roadblocks. So none of these people understand it. None of these groups felt like the government was working with them. And so eventually they all switched to different methods. The Commercial Task Force said they actually had people in the State Department who they were asking, like, how can we get around this? You're part of our task force. What do we need to do? And their hands were tied. They had no answers. So, somebody who's able to go to those state briefings, they're not letting me go right now, needs to be asking those questions because it's unacceptable.
What about the status of Christians still in Afghanistan?
Right. So right now, we're actually hearing that SIV applicants, anyone who worked with the United States, is the Taliban's top priority. Christians are the second priority. And the Taliban is sending known Christians messages and basically saying, we know where you are, we know who you are, and we're coming back for you. So Christians are running for the hills. Some of them are just changing locations frequently. And Pat, we're actually hearing that some Christians are boldly going to the Taliban in their communities and evangelizing to them.
Caitlin, fabulous story. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, one more time, I have said it before, our president is either totally incompetent or he is totally evil. I don't understand. But can you imagine a plane load of people who'd been cleared to leave the country and who were getting out are being turned around by our government, our State Department, and made to go back to certain death in Afghanistan? Can you imagine anything as monstrous as that? You say, how could it possibly be? You know, today is a day that I can't understand what's going on. I cannot understand this so-called two-state solution and the fact we're pressing from the United States government. It's not going to work. As Michael Oren pointed out, they've tried and tried and tried. It won't happen. The same thing here. But what is the matter? It has been one of the greatest diplomatic disasters in the history of the United States. And our enemies around the world are now emboldened. They don't fear us anywhere. The Russians don't fear us. The Chinese don't fear us. Nobody does, because we are in the hands of a feckless group of people who apparently are turning against our best interests. And you say, what in the world are we in, have we given up our country to? But it's happening, and you know, there's no way that they can be impeached. Many people think that Biden and his crew should resign. But now this latest disaster from Blinken and his crowd in the State Department is simply unacceptable.